Hello, innovators. I'm Todd Wyatt, and welcome to the Bridging the Gap podcast presented by Great Tech Group. You're invited to join our conversation to model the future of construction innovation and the digital transformation adventure of this great industry. My guest today is Connor Watermull. He is the co-founder and CEO of MITRE, a human capital management, field operations, and expense management platform that enables contractors to build with confidence. He leads the MITRE team in its vision of making it easier and faster to build our critical infrastructure and ultimately a better built world. Well, welcome to the show, Connor. Thanks for taking the time to sit down and talk with us today.
Thanks, Todd. Excited to be here. I'm a huge fan of the podcast.
Awesome. Well, thank you. So I always like to start with people's journey into the construction industry. So how the construction industry grip you and pull you in?
Yeah, so believe it or not, my first exposure to the construction industry was I was actually a temporary bookkeeper for the construction industry. I moonlighted as sort of an accountant CPA bookkeeper for construction firms when I was doing my last job. And I was blown away at just, how it is that the books get closed in the construction industry. And being an engineer, being a technologist, I felt really compelled to jump in and help customers solve problems. So funny enough, I actually got fired from that job because I wasn't so good at it. I felt the work so tedious and painstaking that the firm I was interning for actually let me go, even though I was an unpaid intern. So I wasn't very good at it, and I wouldn't advocate for anyone to hire me as their bookkeeper or accountant. But it was great exposure to the industry, a great exposure to the problems that contractors face when trying to do things like run payroll or set up their books.
Yeah, that's awesome. Yeah, after 300 and something episodes, it's a first that I've heard of that journey into the industry. So I always like hearing new adventures in. That's awesome. So, not necessarily a successful start out the gate, but what gripped you about construction that was like, yeah, even though this isn't the right fit for me, the industry is the right fit?
Yeah, I mean, I've always loved construction. I mean, I've always admired the firms who build our world, and I've always felt close to it. And honestly, that stint as a sort of unpaid bookkeeper at the CPA firm I was working at was gripping. It was absolutely gripping. So I come from the software world. I've, software engineer, product manager on the software side, and I've gotten to used to a certain degree of automation when it comes to sort of more of the boring back office workflows of running a business or doing your job. And what I found working at the CPA firm is that there are so many aspects of job costing or running payroll or doing expense management in a construction context where even getting an accurate picture of your books or of your job costs is incredibly painstaking. So, for example, you've got to pull down a PDF from your credit card statement and manually enter it into QuickBooks, or you've got to manually export data from certain systems. And so that was the gripping part is, hey, we work in this massive societally important industry, construction, but so much of the back office is offline, manual, run on disconnected systems. And I felt like as an engineer, as someone who has spent, their career in software, like, oh my God, there's, big problems that are very solvable.
Yeah. Yeah. I think that's the weird dichotomy in construction, because the whole premise of construction is you build and fix things and make it work. And yet the tech in the back office of it is, not necessarily known for being the most efficient. It's gotten better over the years, but lots of inefficiencies and gaps there for sure. How have you seen the evolution though over the last couple of years on that front?
Yeah, I think it's exciting. I know that this is a topic that you hit on a lot in your podcast and with various folks around the industry. The industry is, I think, waking up and saying we should not run our businesses on software that was built in the 1980s, 1990s. The rest of the economy has said, hey, cloud, is a real thing. Like we should use cloud software to run our businesses. We should take advantage of APIs that allow us to exchange data between various systems. And the new generation of construction owners and operators are wanting real-time visibility into their business. And so the biggest trend that we feel is going on in our business is that this new generation is embracing the cloud. They're looking for new project management systems. They're looking for new accounting systems. And in our world, they're looking for new workforce management systems to build great teams and also interface, allow their people to seamlessly work with their entire business. So definitely the embrace of the cloud, as sort of maybe antiquated as that sounds, the cloud has been around now for 20 years. That feels like it's accelerating in the last couple of years.
Yeah. Yeah, no doubt for sure. So you talk kind of your mission around the built world better and everything. What does that really look like? What does it mean to have a better built world?
Yeah, it's funny because our mission and vision at MITRE, you can express it at very different altitudes. At the very low level altitude, we want to eliminate that back office, painstaking manual work that I was doing as a bookkeeper. We want to eliminate that, and we want to help the next generation of contractors focus on delivering on the job site and getting an accurate picture of their business and building strong teams. And again, that starts with just removing friction from the back office, allowing contractors to close their books or comply with rules faster. At the high level, though, we think that if we can do that, what we want to do is to make it easier to build things in the US. And we want to make it much faster and cheaper to build societally important infrastructure. And we feel like the industry is held back, both by regulation and compliance, but also because the sort of core business infrastructure, back office software, front office software, hasn't been built yet. And we're excited that the industry seems ready to adopt that software. But a better built world for us means that, hey, we get to building really important infrastructure like housing, transportation, energy, etc., much faster than
Mhm.
we can build today.
Yeah. It's interesting because one of the things that comes up a lot in conversations when you're talking tech and construction is the just inherent friction between back office and people out on the job site. And, you're rolling out a new piece of technology that might be good for the back office, but it creates a whole lot more work for the job site. And they're like, why do we have to do this to make their life easier? They're not making our life easier and stuff. I'm wondering how do you go about addressing that kind of friction that is inherent in construction businesses.
Yeah, I think the narrative that the field and the office aren't in sync is absolutely, a prevailing narrative. I'd push back on that a little bit and just say that
Mhm.
among our customers, like the field and the office feel like they do have the same goals. I don't think there's as much tension between them that at least we've seen. I think the real barrier and the reason why it feels hard is often there's very few companies that are building for both parties.
Mm.
Um, you have project managers, you have folks on the job site, laborers, operators who are on the job site. Rarely are those folks spending the majority of their time in the same software systems that the back office payroll admin is spending the majority of their time in. So I think that's one big barrier. And the second is APIs, again, this ability to exchange data between various systems. The development of those APIs and the usage of APIs in construction is still relatively small compared to the rest of the economy. And so those are the barriers that we see. But I think among our customers, the field and the office have the same goals. I don't think anyone wants to be doing manual work, but it's just about finding those systems that are either well integrated via APIs or those systems that really are building for both workflows.
Yeah. So more the technology kind of interoperability barriers versus the maybe inherent cultural
Cultural,
barriers.
yeah,
Yeah. Interesting.
yeah,
Yeah.
and it feels obvious, but the industry, we've been talking about this changing of the guard, this generational transition. Folks have been talking about it for a long time. I think it's here. I think the generational transition has sort of happened.
Nice.
The folks who are making technology decisions or making decisions around how processes should happen, those are folks that grew up with technology. It's very rare to have owners and operators who don't want the field and the office operating on new technology. So, I think that's here. I think a lot of the populations do have the same goals. You walk around a job site today, everyone's on their phone, and maybe they're not using business software on their phone, but they're checking TikTok or they're checking Instagram. So it's here. The generation transition, I think, has happened. And I think that's why we're seeing acceleration and technology adoption across the industry.
Yeah, I think you're spot on there for sure. So back on the kind of the earlier days of building up MITRE, I wonder if there's a story that stands out there of kind of early feedback from contractors or maybe industry experts that helped shape your either approach or the product itself.
Yeah. I go back and I think a lot about, first of all, one of our first customers. There's a great concrete and paving business in San Diego called American Asphalt and Concrete. And there we were working with, the back office payroll administrator named Michelle. And Michelle had been at American for probably 20, 30 years, in charge of running payroll, closing the books. The business had operated on QuickBooks Desktop for, again, 20, 30 years. Um, but she was collecting timesheets by hand. She was running payroll by hand. She was filing taxes by hand. And as a result, she was incredibly busy. Every week, she had this extremely stressful process where she was collecting time, entering it into an old school system, processing payroll, answering all the questions from every worker around, like, why was my pay this versus why was my pay that? And she had a new grandkid and basically hadn't taken a vacation in like 10 years because she has to run payroll every week. And there's no one else in the office who understood how things like prevailing wage worked or certified payroll work. And they went live on MITRE, and maybe one of the happiest moments still for me at MITRE was seeing Michelle go on one of her first vacations. But I think that's how a lot of operators are running. And over time, American, said, "Hey, can you help us automate benefits?" Again, an incredibly painful back office process that nearly every construction company has, which is managing health benefits, dental, vision for a big group of employees, and making sure that's in order and that's streamlined. Not something that any construction operator gets into business to think about, but as you know, it's what the teams often spend days of their week thinking about. And so, they pushed us in that direction. So that's one particular salient story. And I think that's a huge theme of what we've seen over the years is not only do folks want their back office efficient, they want their software and their platforms to help them build better teams, because it helps them attract talent when you feel like you're investing in technology and you have an efficient way of operating your business.
Yeah. I love that story because it really just brings home the point of what technology is supposed to do, which is help make real people's lives easier and better and get you more efficient, clear up some of that kind of monotony the of the manual task and really free us up. I mean, that's the whole gig of technology and bringing it in. So it's a perfect illustration there for sure.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Uh, any lessons learned from working with construction teams that have helped change, the solution and how you are thinking about technology?
I think absolutely. I think one theme that we're incredibly excited about, and this sort of goes back to the story about Michelle and American Asphalt, is our customers haven't stopped at let's make our back office efficient. They are actively saying, how do we build an absolute engaged, almost radicalized team? How do we build an employee base that freaking loves coming to work every day, who's understands the goals of our business, who feels like this is the place where they can grow their career, who feels like we are building a community and culture and a sense of belonging among employees. And so they're asking for things like, um, they're asking for us to help them deploy training programs across their employee base. They're asking for ways to manage performance and deliver real-time feedback to their employees. They're asking us to help them design bonus programs to align incentives across their employee base. And so it's been really cool to see us and our sort of vision and our product roadmap evolve from, hey, let's solve back office administrative problems to
Mhm.
how do we create the most engaged employee base that we can for our customers.
Yeah. So I want to pivot a bit and kind of lean into the cultural aspect of technology because you have to have good tech, but then you also have to have probably even more importantly the culture that is embracing tech and innovation in order for the technology to work. And there seems to be a funny like paradox happening in the construction industry that as more technology comes in, as more kind of surface level innovation is happening, it's also slowing down the actual builds of buildings. So when you think about 100 years ago or something, they were able to build these crazy buildings much quicker than we're building buildings today. In most part, and take out maybe modular construction aspect of it, but they were able to do it quicker with less technology, where now we have more tech coming in, but it's kind of bogging down the system some. So how, A, do you think I'm onto something with that paradox? And
Yeah,
then
no,
why is that the case?
yeah, we have so much technology and we're building slower. What gives? Is
Yeah.
technology making us slower? So, have thought a lot about this, and it's a core part of our mission. How do we make it easier to build core infrastructure and faster to build
Hmm.
core infrastructure? So, um, the data does say that we're building slower. So there's lots of crazy examples of this. One of my favorite is the New York subway, the recent Second Avenue extension. So the original New York subway was like 9 miles of track. It took 4 years to build in the 1900s, whereas the Second Avenue extension took 10 years and was even more expensive than the initial build out. But the data backs it up. If you look at the overall economy, almost every industry has gotten more efficient over the last 50 to 100 years. If you look at construction, you see productivity maybe falling. I think one of the biggest reasons for that is that we've added a lot of rules to how things get built. And many of those rules, very few people would argue that those are good. They do slow us down, but no one would argue that we should roll back all of the safety regulations that keep workers safe. So
Sure.
one thing that's happened over the last 50 to 100 years is construction has gotten probably 10 to 100 times safer than it was. So the original New York subway or the Empire State Building, dozens of workers died on both of those projects. People look at the Brooklyn Bridge and say, "Hey, that got built so fast." Well, all of the workers that went down underneath the East River got the bends, and so construction has gotten safer. But then there's a lot of regulation and rules that I think have gotten introduced that are not so good. And some of them solve certain political rules, some of them cater to maybe small populations who want to block things. But I think it's those rules that have really bogged us down. And not necessarily technology adoption. It's an interesting thought experiment to say, hey, back in the early 1900s, when we felt like we were really building fast, I suspect we would have gone even faster with technology. I think we could have built that first 9 mile New York subway even faster than 4 years if the contractors working on the project had technology. Um, it's just tough to run that counterfactual experiment. But no, I think we've slowed down mainly because of rules, not all of which are bad.
Hmm. So what to do to get out of that? Is it, is there a certain strategy or even mindset that can help the construction industry innovate and be able to get more efficient despite what rules might be handicapping?
Yeah, I mean, I think a few things. Obviously, if you're going to hold the rules constant, there's a certain set of things. Obviously, first would say contractors should be active politically. and push back against rules that make no sense and that make it harder. Because trust me, there are people who are pushing back on the other side and who are making it more difficult. So I'd say, how do we build smarter regulations and smarter rules? Number one. Number two is, how do we comply with the rules? Again, not all the rules are bad. Safety rules are actually really, really good. They've saved hundreds, thousands, tens of thousands of lives. But how do you comply with those more efficiently? One, how does the government make it easier to comply with rules? And then two, how can you adopt your internal systems and processes to comply more easily? Obviously we have a big a perspective on that, being MITRE and helping contractors comply with a lot of those rules. But I think, compliance and making sure it's easy. The final thing that I think is a trend that we're seeing is scale. Scale matters in construction. Scale allows contractors often to move far more quickly and with less coordination across many parties. And so if you look at a lot of those big mega projects and why they went so fast, it's because you had very few decision makers. Often there was sort of one prime who was extremely empowered to make decisions, move, consolidate up and down the supply chain to get things done. And so obviously in the industry, you see sort of this wave of consolidation happening where contractors in general are getting bigger and they're acquiring their competitors, they're acquiring their partners. I think we don't want to see too much concentration, but honestly, some of that consolidation I think will really help. It'll help us build faster because there's less coordination.
Hmm. Yeah. Curious, how would you describe the innovative spirit in construction?
Yeah, I mean, people say that is construction innovating less than the rest of the economy? Is construction tech phobic? I'd say absolutely not. Like our experience serving the industry over the last 5 or 6 years has been, our industry is hungry for technology.
Hmm.
It's got to be the right technology, but I would say the spirit of innovation is extremely high, and we love working with the next generation of CFOs and CIOs who are moving extremely quickly to retool their businesses for the new era. So I'd push back against anyone who says that this industry doesn't like adopting technology, because we're feeling the opposite, that this industry is ready and moving now.
Yeah, I wholeheartedly agree with that. I push back very, very hard when people say that construction's not a tech centric industry. I think you mentioned the tech phobic. I think we're uh, bad tech phobic in construction. That
Yeah,
if it's not useful, it's not grounded in practicality, then that's not going to get implemented. Where
yeah,
other industries might test it out more, but the construction's like, show it. If it works, then heck yeah, I'm going to adopt it and bring it in, and that's an easy decision there. So you just have to prove that it has real world implications and is actually going to
yeah.
work the way that you say it.
Absolutely, absolutely. Yeah, no, I think again, back to this generational transition. Like, everyone's been talking about it for the last 10 years. I think we should stop talking about it because it's here. I mean, the folks running contracting businesses today are hungry
Hmm.
for technology that works for their businesses and aggressively deploying it. And I think we're going to feel the impact of that. Back to construction productivity and our ability to build. I'm very bullish. I'm really excited about what we're seeing. I'm excited about what we're seeing on the technology front. Excited about what we're seeing on the sort of consolidation and scale front. I think it's really going to help. And again, I'm just really bullish about the industry.
Yeah. Very cool. So, on the good technology front, how do you evaluate the impact of technology in construction? Or, are there certain metrics or outcomes that you like to point to kind of verify that ROI?
Yeah, I mean, I think there's two that I can think of. Number one is you can measure overhead as a percentage of revenue. And obviously, it's really hard to draw apples to apples comparisons, but that's something that we look at, and we say that, hey, if you're using MITRE, your HR and finance overhead should be significantly less than if you weren't using MITRE. And we're starting to measure that across our customers and saying, hey, per dollar of revenue, what percentage are you spending on sort of back office systems, process, labor that you should be investing in other parts of your business. You should be investing that in growth and sort of the customer experience, job site execution, et cetera. So that's probably the biggest one. The other thing is just productivity. Again, like if you look at the Bureau of Labor Statistics or NBER, they look at this across industries, and what they measure is output per labor hour. So from an industry standpoint, that's a pretty good scorecard for how we're doing as an industry. Is output per labor hour rising over time? Is it flat? Is it falling? Over the last 50 years, it's looked pretty flat. Again, there's good reasons for that. We've gotten a lot safer over that period of time. I think you could argue that quality has increased over that period of time. How do we start to make progress though? How do we get safer and faster? And so I'd look at sort of overhead costs as a percentage of revenue, and then I'd look at sort of this value added per labor hour statistic that sort of our federal authorities track. Again, who knows how accurate that data is, but in theory, agree that that's a pretty good yardstick for us all to look at.
Yeah, I like it. Any piece of advice for business owners out there listening that are trying to really bring in that culture of innovation and mindset, and have that kind of influence to adopt technology well?
I actually, even as a sort of software technology person my whole career, I would say that that's not the goal. Like technology is not the goal. Like as business owners, our goal is to serve customers. It's to serve our customers' customers. It's to, if you're building things, it's to create a better local community. It's to create infrastructure, and also to serve your employees. And so I would say, those should be the mission. Technology is a means to an end. And I just think about, how do you build a culture that is free to solve problems with technology? How do you remove barriers to adopting technology in your business? But I wouldn't over rotate on technology for technology's sake. And then the second thing is investing in your people. Again, this isn't a construction thing. This is just, advice I would give to any business owner. How do you create the best possible workplace for your employees? How do you create an environment where they feel like they can build strong relationships, invest in each other and grow? And I think if you do that and you become sort of a local black hole for construction talent, if you're nationally, if you're locally, that to me is the best thing you can do. And I do think technology can help invest in your people and create an amazing culture.
hmm I love that you said that technology should remove the barriers to really allow people to be unleash their creativity and their problem solving skills. I full heartedly agree with that as well. So as we start to wrap up the conversation, a couple rapid fire questions for you. First, what is the phrase modeling the future? What does that mean and look like to you?
Modeling a future, I think to me, that means really understanding your why and your one big goal. At MITRE, we are so, religious about always having one big goal with OBG, which is at any given time, you should know what your North Star is, long-term, short-term, et cetera. And modeling the future, I'd say making sure there's crystal clear alignment. Whatever altitude you care about your company, your team, your own priorities, but make sure you know what your one big goal is.
I like it. What does innovation mean to you?
I think innovation is just removing barriers to solving problems, however they can be solved. So again, at the sort of firm level, it means that giving everyone on your team the ability to solve problems or adopt new solutions to those problems. At the industry level, I think it means removing barriers to new firms, whether those are technology or otherwise, to solve problems in new ways.
Very cool. How do people find out more information on MITRE or connect with you?
Yeah, miter.com, miter.com is a great way to learn a little bit about what we're up to. Yeah, that's probably the best way.
Nice. Well, final question for you, Connor. If I could give you all construction power, you could snap your fingers and innovate one thing in the industry. What would you pick to innovate?
Ooh, I think I would eliminate some rules around local permitting and other rules that certain states and localities and even the federal government place on contractors to build faster. I think that's probably the one thing that I would do to accelerate things.
Nice. I thought you might go with rules. I would have been kind of disappointed if you didn't. That's a good one. It's a good one. Connor, thanks so much for taking the time and joining the show today.
Thanks so much, Todd. Had a blast.
And now it's time for my Todd takes from this episode. First take: tech should clear the path for people. Technology isn't the end goal, it's the means to free people from repetitive manual tasks. When tech removes barriers, it unlocks creativity and problem solving, which is where construction teams thrive. The best technology makes life easier, not harder. Second take: right tech, right problem, right culture. Adoption only sticks when the technology solves the right problem and is supported by the right culture. A shiny new tool without cultural alignment or clear purpose will just create friction. Success comes from pairing practical solutions with a culture that embraces innovation. And finally, fix the inefficiencies first. Construction is built on solving problems, but inefficiencies, especially in the back office, can slow progress. The mindset should be to constantly seek out gaps, pain points, and bottlenecks, then apply technology to close them. That's where true progress happens. Thanks for listening to this episode. If you are interested in learning more, you can visit our sponsor, Great Tech Group, at asti.com for more information. You can listen to this podcast anytime by simply going to Apple Podcasts, Spotify, YouTube, or wherever you listen to podcasts. Also, be sure to check out our website, bridgingthegappod.com. As always, I'm Todd Wyant, thanking you for joining the conversation to model the future on the Bridging the Gap podcast. Keep innovating.